Hello everybody, it's Slippery Jack and welcome back to Slippery Jack Reviews It. And today, you saw the title, I'm doing a top 10 best albums of 2020. So, we're finally done with 2020. And what a year it has been. For most of us, this has been a very hard year and, well, we lived. We made it through 2020, and we can hope that 2021 will be a much better year for all of us. We could finally be done with COVID. But today, we're going to be looking back at the positive things that 2020 has brought us, such as some great music. And the thing is, like, in my opinion, I think this has been a much better year for music than 2019 was. I mean, like, in 2019, I was kind of struggling to find albums fit for the list. But then I ended up finding them, but I didn't really have much else I would have put on there at the time. I found some other albums, of course, that I think could have been added to that list. And that will probably happen with this list, too. And, yeah, that's something I want to make clear to you. This list is not final. It might change tomorrow. It might be completely different in a year. And also, remember, this is based on my opinions. Your favorite album may not be on this list, or it may be ranked at an unsatisfactory level for you. But, yeah. Oh, yeah, and also, the ratings I've given some of the albums that I have reviewed. Unfortunately, I didn't really get around to reviewing a lot of these albums. But for the ones that I did review, the rating will not be taken into account, which means an album I gave an 85 could be ranked above an 87. So, yeah. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Call me crack, you can call me mad and psycho. You can lower my head, sell me into bathing light. Everybody knows when I was sad I fell for you. Everywhere I go, I'm stressing out, I'm stressing out, I'm stressing out, I'm stressing out, stressing.
At number 10, we have the Gorillaz with Song Machine, Season 1, Strange Times. So, believe it or not, I do actually like the Gorillaz. Like, I made it very clear on this channel several times. I am not a hip-hop person, but they have made it something that I can enjoy. But unfortunately, in recent years, their music has been progressing into a much more hip-hop oriented sound, more typical of the stuff popular today. And even though it's still much better than that stuff, it has been worrying me. And especially like with Humans, which had lots of collaborations. The Now Now was a pretty good album though. But this one, when it came out, I saw how many collaborations it had, and I was really worried. I was thinking we're gonna get another Humans again, aren't we? But we didn't. I mean, like, it does have a little bit of resemblance to Humans, but this is a much better album in my opinion. It's much more. I found it much more interesting, and it's less accessible. Less modernized. I mean, yeah, it's modernized. It's got lots of tracks that are your typical hip-hop rap tracks of today, but still a very Gorillaz spin on it. So yeah, the reason why it's number 10 is because some of these songs just aren't my style, but it still is a great album. It's probably their best since Plastic Beach. From the sunless 9, we have Nightwish with Human Nature. My liking for this album fluctuates a lot, mainly because the first half of it is quite inconsistent. The real reason to listen to this thing would be for the second half, which is just a full classical suite called All the Works of Nature Which Adorn the World. And that part does not fluctuate. My liking for that does not fluctuate at all. That suite is fantastic. The first part, though, yeah, like I said, I only really liked half the tracks, like Music, Noise, Pan, Tribal, Endlessness. Those were all great tracks. There is more of a progressive spin on a lot of these. But other than that, they don't really build on Nightwish's sound very much. Like, a lot of the songs on here, they just sound like Endless Form's most beautiful outtakes that just weren't good enough for that album. And yeah, there is a resemblance to that album, but everything that made those songs special is just stripped away on here. But yeah, I know I'm sounding very negative about this, but this is really a good album. I've just seen Nightwish do better. At number 8, we have Tame Impala with The Slow Rush. When I heard that Tame Impala had an album coming, I kind of had a feeling I was going to like it. And I was not wrong. What a great album it was. I loved every single song on here. But it is brought down only because it is very disjointed. More so than any other Tame Impala album. I mean, like, there are moments on this album where it doesn't sound too bad, like the first songs all the way up to Posthumous Forgiveness sound just fine together, but then when it gets into, like, Is It True, that mood is just broken. And when I'm listening to that track after Posthumous Forgiveness, I'm just not ready for the mood, so it takes me a little while to get immersed into the track. And then by the time I'm starting to get into it, it ends, and then so on. And then, like, yeah, most of the tracks just break the mood and atmosphere of the last track. And the way that these tracks sound, I know that they could have been mixed better. They could, but they're just all such great tracks in their own right that it got it this far up the list. If these tracks had been tied together better, I could probably put this in at least the top 3. But yeah, it's disjointedness, and then it's ending with 1 more hour does not help either. That track is just forgettable and doesn't really leave much of an impact on me, though it is still an enjoyable track while it's on. At number 7, we have Mulch at Doma with Monument. So, unlike the previous albums, with maybe the exception of Gorillaz, this album is strong all the way through and keeps a consistent atmosphere. Nothing feels out of place on this thing. Not to mention, it really does build on their sound. Some might say that it's more generic for them. There are plenty of moments on here where you're thinking, oh, that is so 80s post-punk, that's so Joy Division or Sisters of Mercy. You're hearing a lot more of that on here. But those the sound of their guitars, that gritty production, the quirky percussion, it's all very much their sound, but just a little different. For some reason, this album just feels like has like a much bigger feel than their other ones did. But yeah, it still paints their typical bleak picture of life in the USSR. We have Moby with All Visible Objects. This album is a return to form for Moby. Not because his other albums were bad, but because it sounds more like his the sound that he is known for. You know, the past couple of years he's been going on a lot of strange outings, from the indie rock stuff with the Void Pacific Choir to Everything Was Beautiful and Nothing Hurt, which was more of a trip-hop kind of thing with lots of gospel vocals and piano. This one, we're now starting to hear those weird samples, his big orchestral pads, and that EDM style percussion. It's very much a Moby album. It's yeah, these are all the sounds that you hear on this album, from the ambient tracks like Too Much Change or the title track, to the more danceable tracks like Refuge and Power Is Taken. These are all songs that you would have heard throughout Moby's discography. But that doesn't mean that it does nothing to build on his sound. I mean, like, these sounds kind of merged together gives you a very interesting experience. And there is a lot to this album. I found it very enjoyable all the way through. It's a nice listen. That cover of Roxy Music's My Only Love was fantastic. And yeah, I think there's something on here for pretty much every Moby fan, except for maybe fans of Animal Rights, of course. At number 5, we have the Smashing Pumpkins with CYR. This new direction will be off-putting for a lot of Pumpkins fans. It was off-putting for this one right here on first listen, but I've come to like it. It's in fact, like, I've come to think that it's a unique album. It's strong all the way through. There are no bad tracks on this thing. But if this is the hard-rocking Smashing Pumpkins that you're looking for, you're not going to get it on this album. This is a very, very much a synth-driven album. It's very accessible for their standards, and for its length, you would think there would be more variety, but there just isn't. I mean, like, if you look at stuff like Siamese Dream, which is not as long as this album, that has way more variety than this does. But of course, I'm kind of comparing it to their masterpiece, so I shouldn't really be doing that. But point is, if you give it some time, this will be an enjoyable album for you. I don't know, like, if lots of the fans will get it, but people with more of a diverse taste in music will probably get it. Or at least they'll be able to enjoy the earlier albums and this new album. So yeah. At number 4, we have Vesna with Kagda Riadam Ogni. So, Vesna's debut album, Porebny Nastroyenie, was fantastic. It was a very unique dream pop, post-punk, shoegaze-ish kind of album that I return to normally. But when I heard this album was coming out and I heard like some of the singles, I was thinking, this is an interesting new direction for this band. And I didn't think it would be quite as good, but it sure was. In fact, you could it's arguably better. This album, it doesn't have, I wouldn't say it has like as much variety as the last one did. Or maybe it's got an equal amount. I mean, like, the last album had more different moods than this one does. This one keeps a consistent mood and atmosphere throughout the whole thing. But, yeah, this album you're hearing a lot more different styles of music. You're hearing more different instruments. And on the last album, the vocals were a lot louder than the instruments were, so the vocals were kind of what you were listening to mostly, as opposed to the music which was underneath it, which isn't a bad thing, but this album, Tatiana's vocals are kind of reined back, so it gives it more room for the music to shine, and I really like that. This album it's like a lot more atmospheric. It's a lot dreamier. Well, yeah, it's definitely a lot dreamier. What am I saying? But yeah, this is a fantastic album. It has really helped me through some hard times this year, and it is an album that I really needed.
14 when I turned 19, saying R.I.P. So my big bone tree and my girl TT. When she got gunned down, now I'm back on road, cause I couldn't come round to the funeral. Let a whole year pass, made an EP and the fans got mad. A lot of issues that a young man had, just 2 years shy of a high school grad. 2016 when the boy got me, QLT, you're better than my G's. Around the same time I met X and Ski. If the clan ain't hit, then we just might be the ones that have it all.
Number 3, we have the Avalanches with We Will Always Love You. So, this album came out a lot faster than their last one, Wildflower, did, which took like 16 years. This one, since it only took like 4 years to come out, you would think that it wouldn't be as good. But yeah, this was a fantastic album, as you can see. If it's this high, you know it's a great, great album. So, this album, you could say that arguably it has less variety than their other 2 albums, but not like a lot less variety. This thing is, it's got like, yeah, you hear lots of different styles of music, especially like from all the samples. And speaking of, this album actually has less samples than their other ones do. There is a lot more live instrumentation going on here, but these songs are built around samples. But you know what? I loved every song on here. I personally like it a lot more than I like Wildflower. That album, it was just too hip-hop-ish for me. There was just too much rapping. But this one, even though there are rap tracks on this album, they don't feel urban at all. They go with the album. They do not mess with the atmosphere. And it just does a better job at creating this interesting mood. It almost feels like you just, like one of your loved ones has just passed away, and you're remembering like various things that you have done with them. And yeah, it's that's another thing. This is a much moodier album than their other stuff. Of course, you've got those typical feel good vibes on lots of these tracks, but then you've got other tracks that are very, very sad, especially for Avalanche's standards. But overall, this was one heck of an album. I see myself returning to it quite a lot in the future, and I can't wait to see what they do next.
It's all the liberty. I said the messenger who is now there was all on the periphery. I didn't see him, but I heard what he said. All sideways talk, poison in our thoughts. Everyone walks and it's no one's fault.
At number 2, we have Pearl Jam with Gigaton. Gigaton is an angry and masculine album, but at the same time very optimistic, and it is just the album that we all needed this year. I know like it isn't like every fan's cup of tea, but I sure love this thing because of its hopeful lyrics, and it just really helped me through a lot of hard times this year. And every single track it just means something to me. I listen to all these tracks and I know which one is which. Like, of course you're supposed to know that when you're reviewing albums, but they just all stick out to me in their own special way. And I have played it. This is probably the album I've listened to the most this year. I don't know, actually. Maybe I've listened to other stuff this year more, but yeah, I've listened to this a lot. And just nothing feels out of place. I was originally put off by the fact that you had all these heavy, energetic tracks at the beginning, and then all the slow acoustic pieces at the end. But even those slow songs, those have a lot of impact on me, and they are all just as great as the energetic ones. In fact, I don't have anything negative to say about this album. Some may argue that it doesn't really build on Pearl Jam's sound, nor is it Eddie's best vocal performance. You know what? The vocals are fine, and I think that this album does build onto their sound. It is very diverse. What can I say? It's just a fantastic album. In fact, for a long time this year, this was going to be my number one. I knew when it came out, I was like, this is going to be the number one album of 2020. But there is one album that just edged it out.
Out of the king, you can feel the wind of change, blazing honor in the shade. Out of the king, you can feel the wind of change, blazing honor in the shade.
At number 1, we have The Ocean, Phanerozoic to Mesozoic, Cenozoic. So, when I first heard this album, I did not think about it getting on this list, nor let alone getting any spot within the top 5. And that's because when it came out and I listened to it, it just kind of flew over me. I wasn't really into that kind of music when it came out, but coming back to it when I was making this list, I just listened to it and I was like, this is actually pretty good. And then I just kept listening to it because there's something, I knew I could get something more out of it. It's just such a deep album. The lyrics are all very interesting. You can kind of tell what it's about from the title. It takes you through like the Mesozoic, Cenozoic, and Cenozoic period of the Phanerozoic era. Is it called an era? I can't remember. geology. But yeah, it's that reason that I'm bad at geology, why this album became interesting to me, because I just started reading up on it, and I was like, wow, such an interesting concept to make a progressive metal album about the Phanerozoic era. And this is only the second part of it. Well, I shouldn't say only. This is the last part of it. The first part of it was more of like a metal, post-metal kind of thing. This one has all the progressive stuff on it, and that alone is what drew me to it. As you know, I am a sucker for progressive rock, and if you're going to make a like this big progressive rock album, then that really sticks out in that genre, I'm going to eat it up. And that is what I did with Phanerozoic 2. There is, and also, what is also really amazing about this album is that it's not as long, nor does it have as many tracks as most of the albums I put on this list. Most of these albums were really long, and they were just kind of hard to listen to all the way through. Not because they were bad albums, but because I just didn't really feel like putting my time into listening to 70-minute albums. This album, I don't remember how long it is. It's probably just like a little bit over, like above an hour. And it's only got like 8 tracks. So there is a lot to it. There's just as much to this album as, if not more, than the other albums on this list. But it's in less time and less tracks, and it's easier for me to listen to it and get enjoyment out of the whole thing. There is, of course, there's Tool influence on that first track, Triassic, and a little bit of that on the second track, Jurassic Cretaceous, which is, oh man, what a track. That's probably my favorite from the rest of the album. It's just so epic. I love those trumpets. Everything about that track is awesome. It's one of the best progressive rock songs we've ever seen in so long. At least I've ever heard in at least 10 years. And then you've got Paleocene, which is like blowing down, the Doors heavy. And you've got and then after that, it gets mellow, and throughout the album, it almost feels like the world is slowly becoming a little more hospitable for humans. And then by the time you get to Holocene, it's just the music is just very accessible and easy to get into, but still very different from your typical pop music. It's certainly not a pop song. Yeah, this album is incredible. In fact, this might be a stretch, but I think this is one of the finest Ocean albums we have gotten. So, that is my top 10 best albums of 2020. I hope you enjoyed that. Comment down below what your thoughts on these albums are, or what your list is. Like and subscribe to support this channel, and I will see you all in the next one.